Let's talk
about our hopes and dreams, beyond the reach it seems.
Let's talk.
Confess I live in hell, I failed to fall in scheme. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony, where I can talk to you, you can talk to me.
Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk.
Welcome to the Talk Vermont. My name is Reverend Arnold Isidore Thomas, and I am pleased and privileged to have with me today members from Loving Day Vermont. And you're probably wondering, what is that? Is it another version of Vermont's Valentine's Day? Or what is it? And so we're going to meet with individuals who are part of Loving Day Vermont. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves. And as we introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about the organization. So, who wants to start?
I guess we can go in order. I'm Nicholas Glass, one of the co-founders of Loving Day Vermont, along with my wife. I'll pass it on to you.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Brown, the co-founder of Loving Day Vermont, along with my husband Nicholas. And I can share a little bit about Loving Day Vermont to start, if that's helpful.
We'll have the others introduce
who we are.
themselves.
Yes. So Loving Day Vermont is part of a larger global network of celebrations that honor this day. Loving Day has celebrations all over the world that celebrate the Supreme Court decision that legalized interracial marriage in 1967, Loving versus Virginia. We have, I can share more about kind of how long we've been around and how we're tied to the global network in just a little bit, but that's the brief synopsis.
Great, great.
Hello, Paul, he, him, his pronouns. I've lived here in Vermont with my wife Jenny for just about 13 years now. We live in Essex Junction, Vermont. And I'll just share that one of the things that brought us up here was my in-laws live in Burlington, and it's really important for us as we were starting a family to be close to them as well. So that's how we found our way here.
Glad you did.
Hello, my name is Ferene Paris, she, her pronouns, and I live in Burlington with my two daughters, Nala and Melody, who are products of what does it mean to infuse interracial love. And my connection to Loving Day Vermont happened because one time a movie was released about this story, and it was on the verge of its 50th anniversary. And I was so grateful to see something that was giving me context of why I am blessed to have the family that I have and who did that labor in order for me to have it. And so my rabbit hole went deep, and that's how I discovered these amazing co-founders. And since then, myself and other people joining the committee to help keep this mission alive.
Great. So Ferene, Paul, Sarah, Nicholas, tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do. How did you wind up here in Vermont? Some of you have already shared that. Tell us more about yourself before we delve more into Loving Day Vermont.
I didn't address the question of how we ended up here, and I realized you all answered that really well. So, Nick and I are based in Essex, but I'm originally from Kentucky, Nick's originally from Indiana, and we have lived in various places around the country. But before we came to Vermont, we were living in D.C., and long story short, the fast pace of life there, our commutes, we rarely saw each other, and I ended up coming to Vermont for the first time for a residency at Goddard College in Plainfield, and we added a sightseeing trip onto that, fell in love with the scenery and the general vibe here, and so we've been here for about 13 years now, moved here in 2012. Yeah.
Great. And Paul and Ferene.
So I've been an educator for most of my career, and when we first moved here as a family, I took a position as the assistant principal at the Frederick H. Tuttle Middle School in South Burlington, and served there for about 4.5 years before moving over to the University of Vermont. where I served in what was the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion up until this past April. And I've been at Vermont State University as their Chief Diversity Officer since late last year. I've also been able to work as a consultant with a Vermont-based consultancy called CQ Strategies for 11 years now, which seems like a long time. And you know, similar to I think what Sarah just shared, I grew up in Manhattan, so this is a very, very different kind of experience than the one that I had growing up.
Tell me about it.
Yes, yes.
Wow.
But you know, obviously, as I mentioned again, the in-laws were a large kind of draw for us. But I think more importantly, my wife and I also wanted a state and a place to raise our children, and a place that aligned with our values. And I think that Vermont at the time seemed like a really great place and a good fit for us professionally and personally. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ferene.
I moved to Vermont from the Massachusetts area. I've actually lived in, up until that point, I had lived in Mass my whole life, my college, my grad school. And so moving to Vermont, my mom really thought I was like hopping a whole continent. Like, it was like, what, did you think about us when we made this choice? And I mean, being a daughter of Haitian immigrant parents, you know, like I know some of the energy around that, you know what I mean? It's like, you're here, you have your Brockton community, some deep Haitian community, like where is it? Like you won't have blood family around you, like, but we trusted faith, and myself and my daughter's father, who was my husband at the time, chose to dream a little, and he came up here to coach at St. Michael's College. And so he was in that energy of higher ed. I too was an educator in higher ed for 15 years. So when I relocated up this way, worked at UVM for about 8 years, and added a child, added a house, and just with time, really then just trying to figure out what does it mean to be in this community. Being a part of a higher ed community, my role was welcoming new students. So really this idea of like transition and belonging is really important. It's something that I really try to like hold in my value and how I move through this community. And so a lot of energy has happened at our residence in Burlington, Vermont. For a house that had 4 people in it, the traffic has been just beautiful because of basketball teams that we've hosted retreats for, or like women of color brunches, or 50-year celebrations for Loving Day. And I love that our land has done that. And it's really centered some of the most beautiful communities that exist, but don't always get the spotlight and the opportunity to just be soft and exist.
Now, Loving Day itself would you call it a holiday?
For me, it is.
It's coming up in a couple of days, June 12th. How was it acknowledged in Vermont, and talk about that, how the process by which it became an important day in this state? Anyone?
Yeah.
I can start that off and then others jump in if you'd like. So Loving Day Vermont, if I can just zoom out and talk about what Loving Day is for a second at the larger level, outside of Vermont, and then zoom back into Vermont. Loving Day is, as I said at the beginning, a global network of celebrations that honor the Supreme Court case that legalized interracial marriage. It's also an organization with the broader goal of visibility in education and community. So it's existed for 21 years at the national and now global level. It was founded by Ken Tanabe, who himself is multiracial, in 2004. He discovered it as part of his graduate thesis at Parsons School of Design in New York City, and really had kind of a moment of, how did I not know about this? So he started the first celebration there in New York City, and it has just grown ever since. And so fast forward to Nick and I moving to Vermont, I had really wanted to find intentional community with other interracial couples who could relate to our life realities in that regard, and had discovered Loving Day a few years before that. So when we landed here and discovered discovered that there had not yet been a Loving Day celebration or chapter started. I reached out to Ken, who's the founder, and just got his sort of suggestions and ideas for getting one started, because they really encourage people to start your own celebration wherever you are. So we held the first one in 2014, right here in this very building that we're filming in today in North End Studios, which is the irony. Things are coming full circle.
Yeah.
We'll make this a landmark.
So since that time, we've been a community working to create space for interracial couples, multiracial families, multiracial individuals, and really anyone who supports the right to love who we love, and organizing annual events on or around June 12th, which, as you said, is the anniversary of the Loving case. So this is our 11th year of Vermont-based Loving Day celebrations. And we're an all-volunteer group. All proceeds from events that we hold and various fundraising efforts go back into our community connections and really trying to create those affinity spaces. And for us now, I think for Nick and I, at least on our end, it's become extra meaningful because we have a child who's going on 10 years old this year, and just having a chance to raise them in this sort of intentional space where they can feel a little bit less alone in their experience.
Now, as you mentioned, the original couple, their last name was Loving?
Yes,
Richard and
correct.
Mildred Loving
Yeah, right.
Virginia. Yes.
And they were from Virginia. They married in Washington, D.C.
They had
and
to,
were,
yeah.
and because they were not allowed to be in Virginia as an interracial couple.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the intriguing part about your introduction is that all of you came from communities, from states that have a critical mass of people of color.
Yep.
Well, you gave the reasons of why coming to Vermont, but what was the adjustment that you made in moving from communities where there were large numbers of people from your ethnic and racial backgrounds to a place like Vermont where there's a very small percentage of people of color here? I would consider that a courageous move. What are the joys and challenges that you find in being interracial families, interracial couple in the state?
It's interesting because at the time before we moved to Vermont, we were living in Worcester, Massachusetts. We were both working at the College of the Holy Cross, and at the time, Josh was trying to do a different work track, and he was trying to get back into coaching, and he was offered to come for work at St. Mike's. And I was like, but that means we moved to Vermont. And I'm like Googling things, and I'm like, that's like a hard pass. And we were pretty happy at College of the Holy Cross. We lived on campus, rent-free. The community is just so beautiful. It's fine, but then a year later, he's asked again, hey, we'd really love to have you on this coaching staff. And I took the leap of faith, but I was really scared. I mean, I Googled, there was no target at the time. The percentages are I'm like, what am I gonna do to my daughter who already, because of the interracial, she can pass at times because the melanin isn't as elevated in her skin. Am I putting her in environments where she'll be questioned, where she'll have to explain who she is? And that did happen. It happened in kindergarten. I'm so thankful from the moment she came out of my womb. I would always be like, you are the most beautiful black girl. So that at kindergarten, when they were like, what do we have all in common? And she said, we're all black. And they were like, no, you're not, you're white. And she's like, my mama's black, so I'm black, right? And so you have to do a lot of proactive work, I think, to exist here in this interracial, lived experience, because as beautiful as the euphoria can be about it, there's a lot of questioning that can happen about your existence and this in-between that you find yourself in. Is there enough for the different communities that are asking you to sometimes prove your sense of wealth? And I just think about that a lot, raising my two daughters as they move through middle school and high school. Is this about just because they're girls, or is this because there's also kind of dynamics of race at play, but we don't want to name it because it's not as obvious?
Is that a similar experience for the rest of you in some ways?
I mean, I think in some ways, absolutely. I will just quickly say that although I also was an undergrad when I learned about Loving v. Virginia, the case, I really, again, am so appreciative of what Sarah and Nicholas have created here in Vermont with this particular community, because I think it has made my experience, our family's experience, that much richer, to be able to find this community of people. And even if we only gather kind of formally as a group maybe once or twice a year, for our kids to be able to see other multiracial kids and families, for us to at least know, hey, if something does need to kind of be addressed, that we at least have a community that we can go to when we need to have those things addressed. So I just want to make sure that we, again, really acknowledge all that Sarah and Nicholas have done for Vermont, and then for the Loving Day community as well. I'll just quickly add that it's also, I think, helped to educate the broader community about the importance of that Supreme Court case, what it has meant to so many people across our country and around the world. And now, especially, I think it's even more important for us to, A, know the history, and B, understand why it's so important to protect as well. I was just going to name a couple of things maybe connected. We had been living in Massachusetts also at the time. We actually were coincidentally in Western Mass in Northampton, and I was working down in Springfield, which is a little bit further west than Worcester. Right? But I think that even though we had family here to kind of draw us into the state, having grown up, as I mentioned, in other parts of the country, yes, that were absolutely more racially or ethnically, socioeconomically. I mean, there are a lot of different factors of diversity that we could talk about. I think that there were other things that really did draw us here. My wife and I actually, we got married here back in 2009, and it was because it was a lot more affordable to get married here than it was in Massachusetts. But really, I do think that there is something to the beautiful, idyllic kind of Vermont that for me now is very important. I just went to New York City a few weeks ago for a conference, and I was so ready to leave after just a few days, because it was a lot. But I think that there are lots of other reasons that we have chosen to stay here in Vermont, and I think part of it now, particularly now, is even more kind of important to us, is that things like having gay marriage enshrined in the Vermont Constitution is something that not every single state constitution has. I think that the fact that there are other protections, specifically within higher education, in our attempts to continue to try to help make sure that our students, faculty, staff thrive at the university, that others across the nation don't have right now, is critically important. And the last thing I'll just emphasize is, some of the challenges that our children who are Hapa, which is a Hawaiian word for primarily kind of half East Asian and half white, have had in school. And in particularly things leading up to the election in November, and then after Inauguration Day this year, our children, both, again, half Asian, half white, being the targets of comments by particularly some white students who have said things like, ICE is coming for you, or other types of comments related to how the United States has been posturing itself against countries like China. Even though our kids are half Korean, half white, in some ways that hasn't mattered, right? And one unique thing that has happened is that other students of color who might not have always been on the same page about things since Inauguration Day have actually come together in different ways, because they've all been the targets of some harassing kind of comments. And that's something that as parents, right, we have to help our kids kind of navigate and work through, and of course, work with the schools and the district and others to try to address, right, as well. So,
Thank you. Sarah or Nicholas, you have anything to add to what Ferene and Paul have stated, just from your own experience?
Yeah, a lot of the similar things. I mean, I don't want to put a before after timeline with the election, but I know there's always a lot of challenges with things like trying to I'm used to code switching. I'm used to going through life. I'm used to getting along to get along, and I think that's a lot of navigating in Vermont. Also, it's just like, how much do I want to get my kid in that mentality, and how much do I want my kid to be a revolutionary and just get in and not have to get into fitting, you know? So it's a lot of those lines and trying to figure out how to help her navigate that. What does she feel comfort with? Is there a point where comfort is dangerous, you know? Like, will comfort get your kid hurt? Them just trying to be like mentally hurt, you know? I think that's a lot of microaggressions, I guess, is what you what you say is just sort of when something happens, like, hey, like when she was in preschool, a teacher just assuming that they can touch their hair and do stuff with their hair, and just having that conversation with a preschool teacher who I know is probably well-meaning, probably not even thinking about it, just because she does it with all the kids' hair in the daycare. So it's like, is this a conversation I should have? Is this making my kid feel even more different than what they would have if they just let it happen? And I think that's the danger of well-meaning in Vermont, is like you can run into a lot of well-meaning people who just don't know, because they, oddly enough, being around white people in the South and other parts of the country, they interact with black people on a regular basis. They know how to be around black people on some level. And it's more clear when they're being aggressive and being negative towards your child in a lot of ways. Or if you're navigating through Vermont, it's like, I think that person is just may not know. I think that's a lot of navigating that with the kid has been an interesting journey. Different journey than my journey through childhood.
Yeah. Sarah?
Yeah. Piggybacking on what Nick shared, I think just having this this community to be able to sort of dialogue with and have conversations about these tough moments that we are all having our unique experiences with, but also our shared experiences, and the overlap there has been really meaningful. But I think as far as and maybe this is something that you will talk about in just a little bit, but having a kid, you know, in the school system here, part of it, speaking to what Nick was sharing, has been just trying to figure out where there are moments where the intention doesn't align with words or actions, and capitalizing on those moments where it makes sense and stepping back where it doesn't. And as our child is getting older, trying to give them the toolbox of advocating for themselves. So as a mom, sometimes that means just, you know, speaking up and speaking out when there's a word that's been used that is just not okay, that someone might not realize is okay. And sometimes it's something much deeper. Sometimes it's something much more serious that's affecting their whole educational experience. And now we have a child who's becoming, you know, growing into their confidence in themselves, which is great to see. They shouldn't have to advocate for themselves all the time, but it is nice to see that or at least we're attempting to raise a child who is a strong advocate for when they feel like something isn't sitting right too. So, yeah.
Well, you should know that one of the reasons for the title of this program, The Talk Vermont, it stems back to those important conversations, as far as my experience is concerned, that black parents have with their children and how to survive in often racially hostile environments, especially when it comes to confronting police officers. But we expanded upon that by saying these important conversations should be held with not only with black parents and children, but with every person of every race as American demographics change. And within the next 20, 30, 40 years, whites will make up the minority rather than the majority of this country. So we all need to have some form of the talk in preparation for that growing reality that's happening. So I'm wondering, as far as the conversations that you have with your children, is it in some ways initiated by the experience your children have as far as confronting the ways they are perceived as different? Or is it something that you prepare your children for as they enter this diverse environment? Or lack thereof diversity?
I think with my upbringing in particular, I think I was just taught you can't be reactive. You have to be proactive with black children. And I think that's just my mentality with my dad, how I was raised. So it's just sort of, I think, sort of like what you were saying about instilling in that they are strong black women. There are strong black girls that are being grown up. I think that was in me. I sort of promoted that with my kid from the beginning. I want her to also be able to understand that she's biracial, but at the same time, as they say, your skin, how you present sometimes is how the world treats you, no matter what's going on. So I think that interaction with my family, even though I'm in Vermont and my mom and my brother and the rest of my family are 1,000 miles away, we are on a video call every Sunday. Very loud, the whole house can hear it, but Sunday at 6:30, we're talking. A lot of times we're talking about racial issues, and we're talking about what's going on in politics, and we're talking about, and I know as they get older and closer to a preteen, they're wanting to zone it out, they'll put their headphones on, but I think the experience, the aura, the energy of it is just sort of like, there's things you gotta watch out for, there's things that are part of life, there's things that you have to be aware of. Sarah probably say the same thing with like as a female that there's as a woman, there's things you gotta look out at because our child is what's the word? Well, they I'm trying to get to where I'm getting, but yeah, there's lessons that you got to be proactive about, and I think as a household, growing up in a household where race was talked about 24/7, what's going on in politics, who are the people you should know in history, why you should know these people in history, and why does it pertain to now? What is going on today that is all connected was just an everyday lesson for me as a child growing up in northern Indiana. So.
Okay. When you mentioned northern Indiana, that adds a new perspective to us too. Because Indiana is not always a safe place to be. So I'm sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, it's such a balance. Like the minute that I made the choice to have an intimate relationship with a white man, there's some responsibility that will come in that if we procreate, and I don't think not everybody like holds that. And so I was already thinking, if she doesn't come out with much melanin, she's going to be questioned because I'm Haitian and I'm lighter and I get questioned, right? Or if her skin tone is actually much darker, we're going to have to navigate colorism. Like these are things that I'm centering because these are my lived experiences, but but not everybody is able to kind of like go in I guess in that depth, right? And I think some of that is me trying to be proactive about harm that happened as a child, where someone didn't say or talk about like what it meant to touch my hair, or like, and so I'm trying to be proactive, but also I'm learning more and more that they're guiding this because they move through this world as multiracial girls, and that is not my lived experience. Just like I move through this world as a black woman, and that is not their lived experience. And so things that I might be seeing, am I seeing it? Like, and so really trying to like give them space to name it. And there is some responsibility that I have as a mom to be like, whoa. But there is this part because I have done 43 years at least, and so there's some things that I know, but also there are some things that they'll come back and it's like, oh mom, it's like not always about that, right? And so it's like, okay, let's talk that out, and that's the gift that they are driving this as well. Not like I was driven, Ferene, you're Haitian, this is how you roll, like we don't date out of race, like there was like a whole set of rules to do, and so I can't give them rules because I don't know what it's like to move through their world as them, as Ethel or like, to talk to grown individuals who have grown up in Vermont as multiracial individuals and what they say of, they didn't even know the trauma was happening until they like reach 17 and they like teleport out of here. Like there is something that we don't center enough in like what it takes, the labor of love and courage to move through this state as interracial individuals being, especially our youth, when so much is inviting them to like not be centered. And so all of that, I hold that in my heart and trying to find the balance of not being too anxious about it, but knowing my anxiety is there because this is the history of this country.
Yeah.
I wanted to highlight one, I think, just an important piece to this conversation, and then I also wanted to share just a quick story as well. One piece is that, you know, in Vermont Public, literally this week, they were talking about how the fertility rates in Vermont are the lowest in the country and how the state is getting older and older and older. The fastest growing demographic in our state are mixed race individuals. And that is, at least it seems like, where some of the growth is coming from in some parts of our state. And that gives me a little bit of hope in the sense that, you know, we do see a demographic shift that's occurring here in Vermont, both in people who are being born here and then people who are moving to the state as well. So I just think, again, that's important to name in the context of this conversation. The other piece I just wanted to name was that as much as we have been or tried to be intentional with the raising of our two children, we have tried as much as we can to take their lead in certain areas. But one of the things that just recently happened was a conversation we were having around the dinner table around how our children kind of identify. And I think that phenotypically, the way that they look, they both pretty much look Asian American, whatever that kind of might mean. But something that one of our children said that really was profound was that, and it speaks a little bit to what you named, Nicholas, is that no matter how hard they tried or what they did, they felt like they would always be perceived as Asian American, as Korean American, or as a person of color. They would never, their whiteness in some ways would never be a part of the way in which they would be perceived. And they said that they started to feel more and more and more connected to their Korean side, and that was a little shocking because you know, while there are some things that we try to do in our home to honor our ethnic history and our culture and traditions and all of those things, I mean, by and large, they're having American experiences. They're going to American schools, they're speaking English at home, they're watching American content, and still the pervasiveness of race in our country is so strong that culturally, again, one of our children just felt like that there's no way I can get away from it. And has actually, I think, turned that around, though, into a very positive thing, and found kind of strength and a way to be kind of authentic, I guess you could say, in that way, by embracing that side of himself. And that is something that I personally did not kind of do growing up in the same way, that they are.
So how does your white partner, and I'm speaking to you, Sarah, but also to the rest of you, how does your white partner respond, relate, identify with the experience that your children often have where they feel categorized and identified as a person of color, or as a black person, as an Asian American? Do you feel in some ways left out? Does your partner, and how does that person deal with that experience and that set of feeling? You're kind of the only one on this panel, so I don't want to zero in on you.
Notes on that one either. Yeah. My immediate response is to say, I think sometimes in our dynamic, I'm the first one of us to acknowledge or say something about just, thinking about how a particular dynamic or situation, how they might be perceived or treated, and say something out loud about that. In just thinking through, but I think it is probably more so because I'm the plan ahead person in our relationship, and so I'm anticipating and contemplating how a future situation that they might be in or we might be in together might play out. So sometimes I think that's one thing that comes to mind of just I will name that out loud and think about, okay, how will our child Ethelbjort be navigating this circumstance in their identity, and then accompanying that, how will our multiracial family dynamic potentially be received in whether it's a particular geographic setting or whether it's a particular family dynamic that we're going into, things like that. So that's one thing that comes to mind.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of a dynamic of I try to beat around the bush of it, kind of like if I think it's a situation, and I'll be the first to admit this is probably not the healthiest way to do it, but if I think there's a situation that's particularly not going to be great in a racial dynamic, sometimes I'll just be like, oh, I'm too tired to do that, or I don't know if I want to do that. And I don't know if it's some level just not wanting to go down that street, but I think I find myself sometimes using that method to go about it. And I think Sarah will, for better, definitely for better, I should probably respect that a little bit more too. It's like, to be honest, like have the dynamic of let's talk about why I think this particular situation might not be the best for our family, and rather than me just trying to come up with a dodge for that. I think I do that. I think it's just like, I don't want to stress anyone else about this racial situation or that I think our family would not benefit from. So I'll just say, oh, I'm tired, or I need to go cut the grass or something.
Yeah, I'll just conclude that thought by saying, I don't feel left out in my experience in any way in their identity, but it usually just comes down to safety and trying to think about whether they will be safe and respected and treated equitably in a situation. So that's priority one.
Okay. Paul, Ferene, how about your experiences?
You know, Joshua grew up like in the city, New York, Connecticut. I mean, their lived experiences always had a lot of melanated, beautiful community. And so that was so helpful because he had his own lived experience so that we could hand in hand like handle some of the things that were coming up. Like it wasn't just me having a conversation with somebody about touching our daughter's hair. Like he would be like, excuse me, like that is their crown, that's pretty sacred, like they're not a pet, like please do not do that. Or someone, you know, using music lyrics and dropping the N-word. It wasn't like, oh, that's on Ferene to go like handle that, right? And I think we also had conversations of, as the white person who will never get microaggressed or hit in any way, shape, or form in like 10% of what I've had to do my whole life. Your actual role is to absorb more of this is to be the interrupter, because sometimes I have to just protect, I have to hibernate. I do not have it, you know, I don't have the energy to like teach this lesson again, but you have more bandwidth. And so that has helped in what it means to navigate with our daughters. And at the same time, if I would do an affinity space, when I worked at UVM, there was a thing called Sisterhood Circle, and it was for anyone, no matter what age, a femme of color on campus. And I was so grateful I got to bring my kids. But he would never be able to ever enter that space. He's not a woman, he's not a person of color. And so there's this moment that I'm having, right, and coming back and trying to describe it, but he'll never know because he literally doesn't have some set identities to be able to be in that space for it to honor what those individuals need at that time. And so we talk about that, right? Like I feel like that is when the left out can possibly happen, and also just trying to talk about the reality of that. Like us moving to a state that goes back and forth between the first and second whitest one in the nation. These spaces are so deeply important, and you have spaces everywhere. And so it's not a scarcity mindset, it's a celebratory, like, I'm actually glad that you have that. But like, I think some folks have asked that, like, they can't go everywhere with you depending on what a particular environment is honoring.
I'll just quickly add, I feel really blessed. On our first date, my wife shared that, since she was a little girl, her dream was to be a mother. And it's something that she takes very, 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 very seriously. It really is her calling. In addition, she's an early childhood educator, and so she's like really, really skilled with young kids and just children in general. And I think that as an empathetic person, as somebody who has been curious about child development and really allowing children to kind of lead, I think she's done a really great job, an admirable job of trying to help make sure that whatever it is our children are experiencing, that she's coming at it from a place of curiosity and, again, allowing them to kind of define what their story has been. And I think our kids have really been very responsive to that. I mean, they are by far much closer with her than they are with me for a lot of different reasons, but they really see her as kind of a safe, space to be able to process these types of things in. I will also mention that I think that for people of color in particular, there's this constant calculus going on in a myriad of different situations, trying to ascertain whether race is a factor in whatever the situation is. And it's something that I don't think my wife as a white woman can understand. I think there are other identities that she can kind of lean on to help understand whether something is playing out in a way that it might be. But that is something that I know that I think about a lot. And in particular, during the COVID-19 pandemic, right after the lockdown in March of 2020, and the spike that we saw in anti-Asian violence and rhetoric was really, really unsettling. And I worried daily, whether our children were going to get attacked, literally just walking around our neighborhood or in some other kind of violent way, given what was going on in other parts of our country. And I think that as much as my wife in particular would like to be able to understand that fear in that situation, it's just not something as a white person she can understand. I think as a female and as a woman, she absolutely can. But there are nuances, I would say, to that experience.
Thank you. Thank you all. So how far-reaching is Loving Day Vermont in this state? Is it mostly focused upon Chittenden County or the greater Burlington area, or are there people from other parts of the state involved, or maybe even across the lake involved? Tell me more.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that, or should I?
Yeah, well, actually, ironically, our event that we have at Zero Gravity, we usually have a pre-event where we talk to the people at Zero Gravity. And it came up that...
For those of you who are tuning in from outside the state, Zero Gravity is
a local brewery that helps us with an event every year on Loving Day. Okay. And usually they also make a beer in honor of it and give us a bit of the proceeds off of it too. But we were discussing, ironically, the fact that we say Loving Day Vermont and people are like, oh, are you just Chittenden County? Are you just around Burlington? And we've had multiple events where I'll walk up to someone. Like, I remember a few years ago we had an event at an apple orchard, just families coming out and picking apples, and it was fun. It was just a good time with seeing the kids picking apples and stuff. And we were talking to people, and yeah, I came from Brattleboro, I came from Bennington, I came from Newport, and it's just, we heard and we saw on social media. So it's we do seem to have people outside of just the immediate area of Burlington who know about us, who know about our events, and regularly come to our events. So,
great.
So it's kind of nice.
How about so it attracts people from outside of Chittenden County and the greater Burlington area. Do you find that there are similar affinity groups like Loving Day Vermont in different parts of the state, or when they discover that there's a program like this, there's a community like this, or do they gravitate it like I don't know, what's the analogy? But do they really seek you out, or are there other support groups within within other parts of the state that are similar in makeup?
Yeah, I mean, I forget how many years I was living here until I met y'all, but prior to that, there were other spaces that I was able to exist in to hold this narrative of us being an interracial family. There was actually a group of folks affiliated with UVM faculty, but it was called Black Friday, and they would get together at Amy and Jesse's house, who was the coach of soccer at that time, and the commonality was we were all raising brown children, whether they were adopted, whether they were birthed, and just a moment to just break bread and like have our kids see other and like you're just one in the mix. Like if we're like having your ear, it has nothing to do with anything except like, you know, and so it was so beautiful. And so there were those little pockets. And when you were talking about, Nicholas, about just the people that come out for our events, I'm so proud to be connected to this program because I was in Bennington doing a workshop for BIPOC youth, and the same thing, these families came from all over the state to be a part of this initiative that Mia Schultz was doing, a fashion show with students, like with youth owning their crown and storytelling through their fits and just being like, oh, where you're from. And I'm like, you came out like this way to like, because we need it. It's the heartbeat of the community, you know, and it's not just on Loving Day Vermont. It's not just on Mia Schultz. We actually need multiple people taking this like collective tapestry and holding what it means to support this lived experience that is here and is growing, like for real. I mean, it's why the government is really trying to shut things down because they know what's coming. Like, we are here, we exist, and I think more and more we are allowing ourselves to live out loud, take up space, and hopefully do less of the interrupting of code switching and masking and all of that stuff. Because I'd love my kids just to move through and just be authentically them and not worrying like, if I do this, like, are they gonna think because I'm this? And because it's just exhausting and gets in the way of what we all should be doing, and that's like just thriving and like living our best life, you know?
Yeah.
Other thoughts?
I'll just quickly say, I think that there are a lot of different people all across the state and frankly in the region as well who are trying to find, quote unquote, their people. And so whether it's through racial affinity or gender affinity or sexual orientation affinity or gaming affinity, I mean, there's lots of different types of groups. And so I think that, again, some people are organizing and trying to find that. There's an APITA for Black Lives group that I'm a part of that is for Asian, Pacific Islanders, and Desi Americans. I know that there is a group of Black women, I think, throughout the state who try to stay connected as well. And I would say that there needs to be more in all of the corners of the state and kind of everywhere in between as well. And what I would personally also love to see are more intergenerational kind of opportunities as well. I think that what Vermont Professionals of Color, for example, VTPOC is doing is fantastic. And it would be great, again, to be able to try to find ways for young people in particular, right, the kind of 0 to 18-ish group that might not be kind of looking for a job or a career, to also be able to find, right, affinity in that way. But again, in localized environments, in addition to perhaps these statewide or more kind of county kind of based, right, organizations as well.
Yeah.
So as far as your relationships, your respective relationships with your partners, what did you learn by entering into a relationship with a person outside your race? What did you learn? What were your family dynamics like when they knew that you were dating and in love with somebody that was not part of your racial community?
I can pop in with that maybe in relation to how Loving Day got started. In a way, it ties back to that a little bit. In our relationship, my immediate family was supportive, but my more extended family on my late father's side was very opposed, vocally opposed to our relationship. And they made it very clear that that Nick was not welcome in their home, at holidays, etc., in in no uncertain terms. And it was a very eye-opening time. This is 16 years ago now. but it was just a realization of that there was a sort of long history that I wasn't even cognizant of passing down this what I would just frankly name as prejudice and hatred. So I think, and it was also just it was hurtful in the sense that it was named that my late father would not approve of our relationship, which was just another added dynamic to that. After we had a child, some of them eventually came around and apologized for that behavior, but it still continues to just be a source of tension that we navigate to this day. So all of that to say, that was part of why at the point that I did research and found out about Loving Day and that we started a Loving Day celebration here, there was this really strong desire to find others who could relate to that situation and be able to have conversation about it and feel less alone in that experience. So that was the personal journey for me and by extension us to some degree, although Nick has his own experience in that.
Yeah, I think on my side it was, my mom has 68 first cousins.
Wow.
And hundreds of second cousins. So when we go have family reunions, there's the gambit of every type of blend of relationships you could ever think of, probably, period. So I think the sheer number at reunions, I think everyone was just used to everyone having relationships with whoever they wanted to have relationships with. So I think it was a little bit of a different experience, but at the same time, I was also prepared from stories from cousins that, hey, a situation like what happened between me and that side of Sarah's family is a possibility if you have a relationship. So, so that was nothing new either. Like, hey, be aware this is a thing too.
Yeah, yeah. That was your talk.
Joshua was the first white human that I had ever had this deep, intimate relationship with. It would be the first time that I would ever be bringing a white person home to my Haitian immigrant parents. At the time, I was coming out of like a 9-year relationship with another Haitian man. Like the stars were written, like, you know, like culture stays with culture to preserve culture. And so it was really hard to find my voice to share with my parents that I was actually now dating. Not only did I break up with the Haitian guy, I picked up a white man along the way. For his family, Josh has dated outside of his race, so that transition felt so smooth. But we took time to meet he did not meet my family right away. And I remember like his parents like, still haven't met Ferene's family? And he's like, she needs to guide that, right? Like, because, and so eventually there was like a meal that my parents finally said yes to after I wrote them a 4-page letter talking about like, I hope you choose me because I'm choosing this because I'm telling you my heart of hearts, like you raised me to be like, this is how one should exist. When my mom first met Josh, when he introduced himself, she quickly turned around and went into the kitchen and proceeded to cry, looking out the window. And when I went to go check in with her, she looked up at me with tears and asked, do you really choose this? And, you know, like in that moment, my 23 version of myself was, you know, it's like, why can't my mom have my back? And it's like the reality of we have to remember that people can only show up what they're ready to do. And if I took a deeper look, there are reasons why my immigrant mom was skeptic and questionable about what it would mean for her black daughter to be like in such an intimate family of like white people, and what does that mean based on how she's experienced. And so it took time, and with time, they would see the person that I saw. And I remember at this point, it was like, why didn't you tell me you were sending a card to my mom? Like, give me the heads up. Like, she's like, I got my card from Josh, like, you know, and it's just like, wow, once upon a time, you were so against this. Once upon a time, like, you were so fearful of this. It takes time. It takes a lot of time and balance. But it's a reminder that we can arrive there. This idea of taking a risk on love, if we can take the moment to like really keep storytelling about why this exists and who people are.
Yeah, yeah. Paul.
I'll just quickly add, I think growing up, my parents, you know, often would say something like, oh, you know, maybe you should think about marrying a Korean person when you grow up. But I think as I got older and as I started to date different people, that became less important, thankfully. I think after the first time that my mother met Jenny, you know, I knew after our first date that I wanted to marry her, and I think my mom probably knew after the first meeting that she was a good human and that she, I think, had the potential to be a great wife and a great mother. And for her, that was kind of the most important thing. And I'm really, really appreciative of that. And I think for her parents, Jenny's parents, that is, I mean, they were extremely welcoming and open. And I think similarly, you know, we're just like, you know, I don't care what he is, you know, is he good? Is he going to treat me, you know, my daughter well, you know, does he have the potential to be a good dad? You know, all of those things I think were kind of more important. So, yeah, but beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story as well.
In this age of post-affirmative action, and also in a time when there's a dismantling of DEI programs, I know, Paul, that you direct
Chief Diversity Officer, yeah. Okay.
How do you, as individuals who are trying to affirm diversity and affirm inclusiveness, how do you relate to this somewhat suffocating atmosphere that is being generated by this new presidential administration? I shouldn't say new, but repeated presidential administration. How does it affect your journey, your experience, and your children's experience in this atmosphere?
I'll just quickly say, profoundly, in many, many, many ways. And I think that as a chief diversity officer, as a citizen, as a human being, there's a lot to unpack about this specific moment in not just our country's history, but in what's going on globally as well. And I think that there is little that I do that doesn't keep this in mind and think about how it is that I help to keep our family safe, to help our communities continue to thrive, kind of despite what might be happening at the federal level. But I was just telling a group of students this earlier today, that I know that as much as I would like our country to be in a place by the time that I die that is much better than it is today, it likely won't be as far kind of as I would like it to be. And I have resigned myself to that in the sense that it has taken us many generations to get here. It's going to take us many generations to kind of get out of this. And I hope that what I can do with students, with my family, and with others, that will have made enough progress, if you will, some progress, if you will, to a better kind of more equitable country. But I just know I have to keep the long view in mind. And I have to keep on doing all of the things that I can do today to inspire more people to strive for that better, more perfect union that we hope for.
How do the rest of you respond?
Yeah, I think it's from the Black experience. It feels like the playbook's the same. You know, the playbook to go for it's the same. Circumstances change and things go, but I think the lessons and the work that my parents put in me and their parents put in them, it's still the same playbook. It's frustrating that it's still the same playbook, but yeah, it goes back to those lessons teaching a kid. It's like, are these lessons that I'm teaching my kid through my personal trauma? Are these lessons that are still a reality on the ground? And I think on some level, a lot of it feels like, yeah, these are lessons for the reality on the ground. And that might be the shift. It's like, I'm questioning a little bit less, like, is this the playbook of my trauma or the playbook of the what's on the ground? And I think it's like, yeah, it's still what's on the ground. And I still I want my kid to be healthy. I want them to be able to live, to be a free person, to be themselves. But yeah, the reality is it's still the playbook on the ground.
Yeah. What, in these last few minutes, what is it that you probably haven't already shared about Loving Day Vermont that you would like the viewers to know?
I can pop in with an answer to that one, just in terms of a very practical one, which is that our 11th annual Loving Day Vermont celebration is coming up this Thursday, June 12th, from 5 to 8 p.m. at Zero Gravity Craft Brewery in Burlington. As Nick mentioned a while back ago, they've brewed a Loving Day Ale for a number of years now in honor of the day, so that will be available, and Loving Day Vermont receives the proceeds from that. It's an all-ages event. It's family-friendly, dog-friendly, at least outside on their patio. There will be a DJ Ron Stoppable. They're providing a fun soundtrack to our activities, and there will be an open mic portion of the night for folks to share what Loving Day means to them if they would like. So anybody who supports the right to love who we love is welcome to attend that. And then I can also just share that if folks would like to learn more about Loving Day or follow us online, stay connected, you can learn more about Loving Day as a whole, the day and the history of the case, more about Richard and Mildred Loving and the timeline leading up to that Supreme Court case, and global celebrations that are happening outside of Vermont, as well at lovingday.org. And then for Loving Day Vermont specifically, folks can find us on social media at Loving Day Vermont on Facebook and Instagram. Those are a couple things that come to mind.
Those are important.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Ferene, Paul, Sarah, Nicholas. It was a pleasure. It was an immense pleasure having you here with me today. And we're hoping that this interview will connect others to this important organization. Thank you for being a part of this. And for our future events, I should let you know that our next event, the topic will be President Trump's enemy within elimination plan and how it affects people here in Vermont. And so I will have Jill Martinez-Diaz, who is Executive Director of the Vermont Asylum Assistance Project, Big Hartman, who is Executive Director and General Counsel of Vermont Human Rights Commission, representative from the ACLU Vermont will also be here. And so we're going to try and unpack this concern, especially as it affects Vermonters. And so I hope that you'll join us. Please stay tuned. There's usually something about the Talk Vermont on the CCTV Burlington website, and so you can keep posted as to what's going on. And so until we meet again, be safe, be well, and be blessed. It is great having you here.
Let's talk.
About our hopes and dreams, beyond the reach it seems.
Let's talk.
Confess I live in hell. I failed to fall in scheme. Maybe we can find a pathway forward or a clue. So we may together be a symbiotic harmony where I can talk to you, you can talk to me.
Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk. Let's talk.